It's the right time.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are on this fast forward planet Earth, which is still wrapped in a pandemic. As I just wrote a few days ago, yet again, there are 3 billion people with a B still not, who haven't had a single shot, let alone multiple shots. There's a lot of debate about these days about what the right course is. And, it's a complicated planet, complicated virus. And it's an overheating planet. Humans are heating the earth. That's creating all kinds of Sturm und Drang, as they say in German. And sustained engagement is essential because there's no easy answer there either. Our energy choices are all tangled, kind of like some of the houses that Nathanael Johnson is probably going to be poking his head into in the coming months and years after poking his head into issues of sustainability for the last decade or two. And I'm Andy Revkin at the Columbia Climate School. This is the Sustain What broadcast. And we're basically looking at the great reshuffle, which just seems to be a thing. It's almost a hashtag these days, through the lens of Nate Johnson, AKA Sabertooth on Twitter. And you're back. I assume you were on the job today.
Yeah.
So first of all, how are you doing? How are you doing just today? How's life?
Life is really good. It's better than it's been in a long time. So yeah, I was outside today. It's beautiful weather here in California. It always feels it's a double-edged sword because it may never rain again here, but we can enjoy it for the moment. And I was outside playing with pieces of metal pipe, that are going to be conduit to wrap around a house, and just bending them just right and fitting them to their couplings. And there are all these parts that are all regulated, so they all fit together perfectly. And you pop one into another, and you get that right part, and you build something. And so what can I say? It was delightful. The homeowner came out and we had lunch together, and I chatted with him about his career. He was a former professor at UC Berkeley. And yeah, life is good right now.
Bravo. Well, you deserve it. As you said, the life you've lived, the journalistic life you've lived, I think it's been particularly challenging because you're, well, we'll get into this. You've done some very unconventional reporting for Grist. Grist is a great place. They've been doing great work recently, but we all find these niches in the journalism world, and it's pretty progressive with a capital P. It's historically, I started seeing this guy named Nathanael Johnson writing your series on panic-free GMOs, for example, that just seemed to really dig in a very truly interrogatory way on some things that sometimes journalists get sent on assigned a story, or they go into a story with a preconceived sense of things, and you seem to kind of cut against that. That's not easy.
No, I was talking with some of my colleagues when I was leaving about this and reflecting on what I'd done and what my style was. And yeah, truly trying to adhere to that journalistic ideal of objectivity, and even when you think you figured something out, and it's exciting that you maybe people don't know this yet, then still being open to the fact that you may be wrong about that. And every time someone comes at you with a barrage of criticism and name calling, instead of responding in anger or in defensiveness, trying to have that first instinct of being like, well, wait, what if they're right? Is sort of a tough road to hoe. It does require a lot of energy.
So what was there some juncture? Well, let's go back to your beginnings. I'm not sure I know how everyone has a path into journalism. Now you're taking a path out of it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the path in. What led you into the field to begin with?
Well, just initially, I started working at a small-time newspaper in 2001. in Burley, Idaho, and I just got a job out of college. And I hadn't done the student newspaper, but people told me that I was good at writing, and I didn't want to be a starving novelist. And journalism at that point still seemed like something you could earn, maybe not a good living, but a living in. And so I was just applying to newspapers, and and it was this sort of miserable assignment. I had a editor directly over me who was really manic, up and down one day to the next. And we were in a bureau, so it was like me and her out there. And I was this young man who was, wanting to meet people, and everybody in the town was married after high school. It was this Mormon town, very religious, very conservative. And but I also sort of fell in love with it. This experience of being able to call up someone and have them give them your time, being willing to give me their time and tell me how the world worked according, through their eyes, and give me their expertise, the ability to, hear contradicting information from two different people and then figure out who was right and feel like I could pin the other guy to the wall. That was incredibly satisfying. And there's also something magical about working for a newspaper. This is a physical newspaper. I'd file my story on the county commissioners meeting or whatever, and then it would show up on my doorstep, 6 or 7 hours later. So all of those things I really got into, and and then I went off to journalism school, and I did public radio, and I did magazine writing and other things. But for all of those, most of those 2 decades that I was working in journalism, I really thought it was the best job in the world.
And food was an initial focus too.
Yeah, well, so in Burley, this was an agricultural area, and I came from I was born here in Berkeley, and so I came from the world of small artisanal, fetishized food, and into the world of 40,000 acre beet and corn farms and potato farms and giant CAFOs, giant confined animal feeding lots. Right. And so Burley, Idaho, the lead, this story came from those days that you're showing, came from those days in Burley.
It's a pretty good lead. My interest in pig sex began over drinks at a bar in Burley, Idaho. Not a bad point. So then you kind of migrated back toward Berkeley, I guess.
Yeah, so I went to grad school in Berkeley.
Right.
And then just kind of stuck around. Yeah, I ended up, aside from some jaunts, I went to Alaska for an internship, and but I basically stuck around the San Francisco Bay Area doing magazine writing and starting work on the books, and working for public radio for about 5 years.
And all through that time, it felt pretty sustainable.
Yeah, not just sustainable, but joyful. I think that's one thing about my work all along has had this element of joy to it. And so when that went missing, it really felt like a problem.
So let's jump to the Grist era, where I guess, was there a moment when your thirst for that reality, complexity stuff started to tweak you toward, or were you always like that?
I think I was always like that. I mean, the thing that drew me to journalism initially was just the desire to tell good stories. I knew I wasn't great at writing fiction, but I liked that feeling of going to the movies and feeling emotionally moved. And so the combination of being able to tell good stories and And this sort of science fiction aspect of being able to uncover cool ideas and play with them, the kind of thing that you get to do as a science writer, and you get into these things, it's like, whoa, what is that? Wow, that kind of makes me feel tingly to think about the world in that way. I can think of dozens of examples.
What's one or two? Is there something that comes
I just remember finding out about transposons, these things that aren't really alive, but they act like they're creatures, and they're basically bits of DNA that jump from one spot on the genome to another, and then into completely other species, and carry chunks of DNA from one species to another with them. And this just wow, everything that I learned in my high school Darwinian biology, this just completely is out of the book. This idea that we might be sort of radically interconnected with the family, the giant family tree of life, in these very weird ways. These ideas like that kind of make me feel a little bit tingly, in the same way that I feel if I'm, reading a good bit of science fiction, but it's not fiction. That's sort of the beauty of. I think that's the sort of thing I started stumbling across. Initially, in the works of Michael Pollan, who I went and studied with in grad school. That I was like, wow, I could do that. I could write about science in this way that gives you that evokes an emotional charge.
The power there of narrative too. I think, the things that we glom onto as people are the surprise, the unexpected, but also conflict.
Yeah.
Journalism, this is where journalism, some of the traits of journalism as we knew it, and know it still, are to focus sometimes too much on a narrative line that might not be so well supported, or on, disagreement just as the story.
Yeah. And that's that. I felt that tension all the time. This, the tension between telling a good story and sticking assiduously to the facts. And you see people like Jonah Lehrer flame out. There is this huge temptation to play fast and loose in the interest of narrative with the facts. But the thing about conflict, well, maybe this I won't stand up on my podium, but there's a conflict is interesting because it's where the people, it's what the people want, right? When I started writing about climate change, there's only so many stories that I can write that say, we should maybe stop burning so many fossil fuels. There are only so many stories that I can say that essentially that bad, greedy people are bad, and should, we need to figure out systems of governance and institutions that could constrain these kinds of activities that allow them to make lots of money, while imperiling all of the rest of us. And so then, after a while, you say, okay, what else? Where can I actually move the needle? Who's actually listening to me? Well, the people that are listening to me, and this, this GMO series that you have up on the screen. Yeah. Where are the things that I can actually give them something that they don't already know? And where are the things that the audience might actually be wrong, or actually learn something from my reporting, instead of just sort of reading what they already know and feeling good and affirmed that they're, someone has said, put words to their beliefs in a way that they haven't done themselves, which is, I think, unfortunately, is what a lot of people are looking for these days. But I really kind of wanted to have an impact, to be useful in a way.
Yeah, that was before solutions journalism really became a thing.
Yeah.
Which now happily it is.
Yeah.
with lots of questions attached there too. And you started to get, as we can see here, I did include a couple of these screen grabs from GM Watch or whatever, and that I know, I've dealt with a lot of this too on the climate beat over the years. And was that one of the things that started to wear you down, or were there other aspects of this that kind of were getting to you?
I mean, I'd be interested to hear what your feelings on this sort of thing is. So, yeah, I was sort of burned in effigy by anti-GMO groups who were just astounded that an environmental, someone who cared about the environment would have this apostasy to point out that there's probably not that much that's wrong with this technology, and perhaps there's some ways that it could do good if we actually directed it in the right way rather than simply leaving it to the big corporations. So yes, it's wearing to be attacked. It's wearing to have people try and drag your reputation down and call you names. But it also feels like affirming. Your people are engaged in a way.
Right.
So I'd almost rather be in the middle of the maelstrom than just sending out the stories that go off like the lonely Voyager probes into the darkness.
So let's get into this. Okay. You in January, just a couple of weeks ago, you posted a really engaging Twitter thread on what's going on, and maybe I don't know if you could just read it or just.
Sure.
It's kind of fun. Yeah, I mean, if you don't, you could just read it.
Yeah. Do you have the whole thing here? Or,
I think I have a chunk of it.
Yeah. I think that's it. So I've been unusually quiet here. I just wanted to let you all know what's going on. This is my last week at Grist, and next week I start full-time as a trainee electrician. Over the last few years, I found myself feeling increasingly jealous of the people I interviewed: foresters, power plant workers, farmers. In short, people who interact with physical atoms rather than bits. At the same time, I've found it increasingly hard to get past the tough parts of writing: the crappy first draft, the edits, revealing my failures. All my life, work has been an adventure. Raft guiding was an adventure for the first 3 years, writing for the first 17. Now, slithering into crawl spaces has me happier than I've felt in years. The work is like a real-world logic problem that needs to be solved using oversized Lego pieces. I found a wonderful mentor named John Kasdan, who's a delight to work with. I'm taking community college classes at night classes. It feels good to be doing something that's unequivocally useful. After years of writing about climate policy in the abstract, it's unbelievably satisfying to be directly electrifying everything. After so much talking, what a relief to start doing.
I just love that last line.
It's also crazy after journalism to jump into a field where I can just drop out of the blue and find a great job locally in a couple of days. I'm taking an initial pay cut, but the potential pay is far higher. Why didn't anyone tell me about the trades? And I say that partially in jest. People in high school were there was a program, but I sort of thought it was beneath me.
Right.
I've just followed my gut and what made me happy to this place, so I haven't fully understood and rationalized it. I'm feeling that old urge to write, to figure out what's going on. Maybe this is just the pandemic, maybe it's my midlife crisis, but I'm happy. I still think journalism is wonderful, and Grist is just about the best place in the world to practice it. I'll miss the connection to brilliant, driven people, i.e. you. But I'll still be here from time to time. Here's to courageously embracing change.
Hear, hear. Here's to you.
Thank you.
Now you've gotten a lot of input after that. Is it mostly just hurrah, good luck kind of stuff, or anyone frustrated?
Universally, no. I mean, this is the best thing that ever happened to me on Twitter. It was really fun to, it really struck a chord. And I think especially the people who live on Twitter and spend so much time staring at their screens.
Yeah.
This idea that you could just like break free, tear open the screen and break free into the real world. And yeah, and just sort of grip your fate with both hands and take control of it. People kind of like it.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's electrician work. Why that? There are other trades too. There's construction,
Yeah.
woodworking. What was it about electricity that captivated you?
Well, there's the very practical answer, which was just that there's clearly not enough electricians out there right now. It's kind of mind-boggling how hard it is just to keep up with the number of calls. This morning I went through my boss's phone and I wrote down a bunch of phone numbers and I called these people up and apologized that we hadn't gotten back to them in a month. But there's so many people that need the work and there's just not enough electricians.
Yeah.
So in a way, it was this very mercenary decision. I like carpentry as well. I play around with those things, but there's also there isn't the same credentialing, the artificial scarcity, and there's a lot of people, that maybe aren't native English speakers, but have much better carpentry skills than I do.
Yeah.
And so this just seemed like something that I could maintain or increase my income in, and it wouldn't feel like so much like running off to join the circus. But there's also, the other side of that is that I've been thinking about is what happened that journalism went from feeling like the best job in the world to being kind of intolerable to me. And I think it has something to do, some of it is just the learning curve. I wasn't learning as fast anymore. And, but some of it just was feeling harder to convince myself that, the sixth story that I've done about, the latest climate science was worth doing. That this next story about fire in the West, it really made sense to make that one more phone call, and so it just sort of felt like, I think maybe what's happening with this great reshuffle is with the pandemic, people are trapped in their houses, and so they want change, but it's also that it's harder to make work feel meaningful when there's these big catastrophes happening outside our windows. And so I think that we need good journalism. We especially need good climate journalism. But I can imagine, like, if I was alive during World War II, I could imagine going from being a policy wonk during World War II to feeling like I'm going to enlist, and enlisting as an electrician is a way to go out and get my hands dirty, and put my shoulder to the wheel.
Right. Are you learning lessons so far that having written a lot about the electrify everything necessity of our time? I just did a piece a week or so ago on the retrofitting challenge, which is enormous. Not just about electricity, but I live in an area that still has 5 million oil heated homes, including my own, and you cannot put a heat pump. You can't have a heat pump run a steam system, steam radiators. So it's like this long journey, and I don't know whether you've learned things already about from looking at wiring and how houses work, or other structures that informs those questions.
Well, most of what I'm learning is insanely small and practical, but the bigger picture is just that that these things are complicated and hard, and that makes them expensive. So
Yeah.
you know, so you go and you just, all you want to do is get a new, replace your stove with an induction oven and cooktop. So you can afford to buy that, get rid of the old gas stove. But then the electrician shows up you realize you need a new plug a new outlet to put the plug into. And the electrician shows up and says, okay, well, we're going to have to run a new line. And gosh, your house, you don't really have access. You don't have anywhere to run it through. We're going to have to saw into this old lath and plaster of your house and create a new channel. And that alone is going to take 2 days. And then actually, when we got to your panel, there's no space left in your panel. And so do we create a new sub panel? And actually, you're really using as much power as you already as you're set up to be able to use. We need to run new lines from the electric power lines down and replace their panel entirely. So now we're talking thousands of dollars.
Right.
That has nothing. You thought you were just going to get away with whatever, the $1,500 fancy new appliance. So yeah, it's the rules for new construction start to make a lot more sense when you realize how locked in these systems get.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I've seen that already in our old house.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure.
the one we had before this, the old house we had before this old house. And the idea of the only thing that gives me solace is the embedded energy in an old house, meaning you're not building a new one.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's at least that.
There is at least that. And
doing what you can with efficiency and the like.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, and it's doable. It's not easy, and it feels a lot more expensive, but it's also not prohibitive. When you look at the long term, if you can afford to look at the 20-year time horizon, it really does start to make sense.
So you haven't lost hope in the sense that we're moving toward, because of turnover and the like, you can eventually really move to having newer, better systems. Some of these modular homes that are passive energy houses that are sort of pre-built in these arrays that have the wiring already in the walls and stuff seem interesting for the next generation of homes.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think, there's, it's not loss of hope. It's just one more step along the way. One more challenge, one more puzzle.
There's a question that's come in from a former journalist, Zen Dubin Scott, who was at the Los Angeles Times, and she now is working on communication work, in part on sustainability-focused issues. She says, thrilled for your transition, but do we need to worry about more good people leaving the field? I worry about that and the unsolved problem of news outlets making money on the web, where everything is going. Another way to think of that is the students at Berkeley and Columbia journalism schools. And I don't know if you find yourself running into them and them asking you, even before you made this transition.
Yeah. Oh yeah, all the time.
What do we do? What do we do?
Yeah. And even it's interesting. Someone got in touch with me through the post on Twitter, who's doing the opposite thing. She was going from being an iron worker to being a journalist, and obviously very bright young woman, but gosh, a much tougher road to hoe. To sort of, you go from the thing where there's a real need and a real demand for the work to, it's like, how do we make money on this? And by the way, would you be willing to beg on your knees for an unpaid internship? I really don't feel like, the sort of unsolved problem of news outlets making money. I feel like journalism has always been weird in this way. It's always sort of relied on rich people with vanity projects funding newspapers, and every once in a while it's wildly profitable, and then it crashes for one reason or another. I think like when you look at this deeper time horizon, it's always been weird. And yes, we do need good people there, and it gives me hope that it is this sort of still high status thing that draws in a lot of excited young people. I don't know. What do you think is the answer to that?
Well, surely adaptability. And I keep seeing people who, young people who've come up with a fresh way to interrogate a tough question. And, some of the ones who are already old cases are Brian Stelter, who started out as a college kid writing, blogging in an unusual way about things, and then migrated to being a media critic, media reporter, and went to CNN for what, which has become a very interesting place recently. But, he kind of invented a way of looking at the world that was fresh and interesting. I think that's still doable. It's certainly in the world of podcasting and like too.
Yeah, YouTube as well. There's some really interesting work.
Yeah, so the entrepreneurial aspect, you can. The good news is that the bad news is there's 50 million bloggers and podcasters. The good news is if you do have a fresh way of looking at things, or if you're in a place that's unusual, I do tell young journalists to try to get to some place where no one is. And so when you can tell a story in a way that is unique, and those feel like promising prospects. And hone, be a good writer. It doesn't hurt to actually write well.
What about the brain drain at the older end? You're someone who has a special insight on this, because you've managed to keep, you've reinvented yourself a couple times, but have you gone through similar kind of periods of disillusionment and
Oh, sure. When I took the buyout at the New York Times the end of 2009, but I started to plan to leave the Times the beginning of that year, way before they announced. That was the first year of buyouts, and I had become dispirited about the kind of the news cycle. The hurricane happens, or you're reporting aspects of it. There's the TikTok, the curtain raiser, the conflict over, is it climate change? There was like a year's worth of that with Chris Mooney and others, and we're all digging in on hurricanes, global warming, or what else is going on. And after going through that cycle and having it intensified because of social media as that evolved, it just felt like, okay, kind of, the thing that really struck me in the late aughts, 2007 through 2009, was the first time I started to interrogate the behavioral science.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm talking to sociologists and psychologists who are saying, that people don't make choices based on information, that, the stories don't change people. And it was like really well-established science. This is not like, it was just science that I'd come at the climate problem, since my little totem here, my 1988 article, as a biogeophysical problem. CO2, it traps heat. It's warming the earth. That's doing X, Y, and Z. And here's a menu of things we could do. Without the first time I talked to a behavioral scientist about this was 2006. I'd started in 1988. That's pretty bad. And she said, and Helen Ingram at UC Irvine said, things that people vote on are things that are soon, salient, and certain. And she said it like as bedrock as Newton talking about gravity.
Yeah.
And that was like, so am I going to spend the rest of my life writing stories like the ones I've been writing, winning some prizes, getting a book, or should I think about this more deeply? And so when I left the Times, it was to take a job in academia. I invented this position at Pace University, and I see Norm Benson is in the green room to ask a question, but your camera, Norm, is not Doesn't seem to be attached. I'm not sure about your microphone. I'll bring you on in a second. Oh, there you go. Hold on a second there, Norm. Grab some of the M&Ms, and there's a cooler with beer in the corner. You'll be on in a minute. Yeah, so that was existential. That reporting was existential for me.
Mm-hmm.
And my title at Pace University that I invented was Senior Fellow for Environmental Understanding.
Hmm.
It wasn't environmental communication, because communication, as
Yes.
journalists did it, was one way, me telling you.
Here are the facts.
Yeah, and then
change your mind based on these facts.
Yeah, and the blog I did at the time, Earth, was all about engagement and listening, and there was noise and dreck and idiots, but there were really wonderful. It was a wonderful prismatic lens on the issue. I was getting input that I never would have thought about, and from all around the world. So from that point forward, it became much more focused on co-production of knowledge, co-production of constructive conversation, and less on storytelling. And that's what keeps me going. Is I'm with you on the hardness also of writing a good story.
Yeah.
I think I'm better at holding a good conversation than writing a really good story. So let's get Norm. Hold on. Norm Benson has a question. And I've invited people to come on. Hey, can you hear me?
Hey, Andrew, or Andy. I just wanted to wish Nathanael the best, and I am slightly pissed that he's leaving so that I can't hear his great voice again.
Where in the world are you, by the way?
I'm north of Nathanael, up in the Clear Lake area, right on the south shore of Clear Lake, the eastern arm.
Do you need any electrical work?
Always. But I'm afraid Nathanael would probably charge me the 2.5 hours that it'd take to get here.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
But I do have beer. I have a really great IPA on tap, and several more cans from New Glory Brewing, so I can entice you with that. Also, decent coffee.
Are these beers that you've brewed, or?
Yeah. I brew my own. So.
Was there anything in particular, Norm, that you like about the way Nate pursued his craft, the previous craft?
Oh yeah, his attempt to find the discussion in all of the noise, the lack of, it seemed like a lack of agenda, or at least an attempt to discover what someone else's thoughts were. So that I really found helpful and useful, and while we might be on the opposite ends of the idea, at least the struggle was what I really appreciated.
Thank you. That's good to hear. And that was certainly the attempt. My agenda was always to learn something.
Yeah. So and I ended up where I was, that after 50 years, I decided that all of the predictions that I grew up, was at the first Earth Day in college, and so we had Ehrlich and the population bomb and a number of things, and all of the predictions were not coming true. And so I went on kind of, why did that happen? And ended up in slightly different places than Nathanael, but anyway, just wanted to say thanks.
Yeah. Well, thanks for popping by. On Sunday mornings, I was holding this Sunday webcast. People around the country coming on to do music and poetry and stuff, and it was like a drop-in kind of a session of this, and it's good to have you here, Norm. So thank you. And if you have any last question, maybe fire away, and then see if anyone else wants to come into the
No, I'll pop off now and just say maybe we can have coffee again, Nathanael.
That would be great.
That'd be great. Talk to you later.
Take care. That was fun. Is he someone you had interacted with before?
Yeah, he's one of those people I met on Twitter, and then he's working on some he's a historian of some stripe. And so he's down at Berkeley at the libraries
Okay.
doing some work.
So, do you think you'll keep writing in some way or other?
Well, I am, like I mentioned in that Twitter thread, I picked up my yellow legal pad at the end of the day a couple times and just jotted down some thoughts. Like this. I'm trying to figure out like what's going on. What happened with that big question of why. How did I get from just loving journalism so much to not wanting to do it at all and being unable to face that blank page and muster up the fortitude to try yet again to tell the story that's going to just grab everybody by their lapels and get them to pay more attention and open their hearts a little bit more. So I'm writing a little bit, and but it feels different. It feels a little less like slog and more of the old enjoyment.
That's really good. And what you're a family man, so what does everyone think about this?
I have a wife and 7-year-old and 10-year-old daughters, and they're like a little miss of it. I kind of like the idea of you being like an electrician, of a journalist. Like now you got bored with that. You're going to be an electrician. Like, so I don't. My wife we met when she was in architecture school. She finished her master's in architecture and then promptly went to nursing school and became a nurse practitioner. So there's precedent,
That's pretty interesting.
So we had some deep conversations, and the upshot was, seems like, here's this thing that I was sort of doing a little bit of. I'd started doing some work rewiring my own house, and was really enjoying it. And I was doing some carpentry as well, and it was. It's like, here's this thing that I'm doing as a hobby, and I'm having so much fun with it, and I'm sort of having to drag myself by my collar back to my computer. And then I think, this thing I'm doing as a hobby is actually, I could make more money doing that if I did it full. So after a while, I ran out of reasons not to leave.
That's really cool. I want to show this video you posted because it gives a sense of. I hope you keep at it, whether it's through written notes or some kind of a journal, or some of these little videos are really fun.
Mounting a box that's as old as the trade stuff. Maybe not that old. It's pretty old. I found.
And tell us about your
versions of these.
The person you're working with.
These are them.
Okay, yeah.
Box scripts. I don't know if you've heard of them before.
Yeah, Madison scraps too, or I've heard.
Oh, really?
Or battleships.
Battleships. I've heard boats.
Yeah.
So should I talk over this? And
well, let's wait a minute. You can watch a little bit.
Give me some boats. Give me some battleships. If that counter has been doing it forever, let me go. I don't know if it will look at you funny if you give them the correct name or not. But there is a correct name. There's a name. There's an official name, and that may or may not be the one that is most commonly used.
So I just muted it. Yeah. So talk a little bit about him and your relationship, how that works.
Yeah. So this is John Kasdan, who's my boss, and you can kind of tell from this. This is not edited. I could probably make it move a little faster. To figure out if I'm going to do more of this, I have to learn some videos.
I think it's the stream. It's not. It's fine. It's just that it's a little choppy when I stream it.
But he, you can tell he's just a wonderfully patient educator, and so I kind of expected to go into this and be like, we're all in a rush. We got to do this as quickly as possible. He really sees the value in slowing down and teaching me the right way to do things, and telling me the stories so that I get it. And he's someone that I knew through a mutual friend when I was looking around for help with some of the work I was doing on my house that was beyond me. He came over and did a little work. And my first impression of him was that he was like laconic to a fault. He had sort of no interest in interacting. And so then when I texted him and said, look, I'm taking these classes, and I've got that they gave me a trainee card to the state of California so that I can work. And I'm kind of, would you have any use for someone to come in once in a while and just try this out? He just called me back, and I think he just has, 30 years of knowledge in his brain about this stuff, and he's really enjoying sharing it. And he's been sort of doing it on his own for a long time. So
Yeah.
So we're trying to get up to speed together, and he's also interesting. He makes movies, and he makes sculptures out of old discarded electrical parts. Turns them into robots and stuff. And so I feel really lucky to have found him. And yeah, it's been a very positive partnership.
That's great. That's great. So were you ever in a mentoring position as a journalist, or did you teach, or were you ever?
I taught just a little bit at the Berkeley Journalism School, and at Grist, I tried to do all I can. I really enjoyed helping the younger writers out, and that, I think toward the end, that was the most gratifying part of it. Just watching these, I can name them, like Zoya Tirstein and Shannon Osaka. It came, some of them kind of Emily Pontecarvo, some of them kind of raw to Grist, and then just turned into these amazing, badass journalists. And to just be able to help out with, like, the knowledge. Here are all the people that, oh, you're interested in this? Here's like the quick primer, and here's the best talkers, or the most interesting thinkers, and here's their emails, tell them to send me. So that was the sort of thing that I do.
There's Betsy Rosenberg saying, I'm a Cal grad, and JP Isham asked a question. Have you ever tried any of the other media channels to engage in conversation for sustainability, Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces? Were there things you might have tried or thought about or something that might pull you back in?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've been through a few different, iterations of media over the past 20 years, and I'm interested in video. I mean, as I was learning how to work with my hands, there's this amazing trove of DIY videos on YouTube, and some of them are really sophisticated and interesting and creative. And so it makes me kind of want to copy that. And I don't know if we'll see if what I end up exploring. I mean, it's a different skill set, and I may try it, but yeah, I'm not so interested in Clubhouse or but some of the video things, TikTok and YouTube, they really sort of grab me, so it makes me interested in experimenting with them.
Have you posted those electrical day in the life videos yet on TikTok?
No.
Okay.
TikTok was too grabby for me. I ended up deleting it because I.
Yeah, I'm still not quite there.
Yeah.
So tell me, we're getting toward the end here, but tell me a little bit about this guy Scott, who you reached out to, I think, and to help you grapple with how to craft the reshuffle.
Yeah. He's a former source. I wonder if I can pull up. Can I share my screen?
You can, or I can just do it from here.
There's a piece that I wrote maybe 4 years ago called, I think it's called the 48 Hours.
Oh yeah, I've got it right
here.
for us. Yeah.
That he was a key player in this story, and I just really enjoyed talking with him. This guy's a trip, and at that same time, he was kind of going through his own transformation and realizing that, where he felt most fulfilled was not sort of helping companies craft their sustainability missions, but helping these CEOs go through their journey of personal change that led them to make these decisions and in a really genuine way, try and make their companies successful rather than sort of doing it as a superficial, like keep activists at bay type of way.
Right.
And so that's what he's doing now. It's just basically helping people with big changes. I think I don't know if he's completely figured it out, but there was something about my interactions with him that I felt when I was kind of in the dark places and feeling kind of depressed and like I wasn't being useful. I was just not getting a lot done in the middle of the pandemic and going to work and then procrastinating and ending up watching videos on YouTube rather than doing my work and just feeling really that doesn't feel good. And so yeah, I just had a couple of conversations with him where he had some really good guidance. So I just offered at the end, people were sort of like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? I was like, people out there that might, like Scott is coaching people like you might be interested in.
I got in touch with him when I saw that, and I'm going to do a session with him, at least one webcast.
Great.
So he's back. I think he's in Southeast Asia right now, working on another palm plantation related project or something. Okay. Sounds like a really interesting guy.
Yeah.
So if you put yourself in his shoes briefly, it sounds like you've been doing this a little bit since your Twitter thread, but is there a fine line between, would you encourage some people to find a way to stick with the practice of journalism, or what is there some way to identify when the fulcrum is sufficiently in one direction to move or to stay, or is that still a very personal kind of thing?
God, that's a deep question. I mean, in general too, just beyond journalism,
Sure.
When do we seek nuance and muddle through versus when do we seek the clean slate and starting over? So the thing that Scott told me that really worked for me was to stop trying to think about it. The rational mind is going to rationalize whatever you do, and it's bad at predicting things, and it's going to tell you stories and that don't necessarily give you good guidance, and instead just to feel and notice, if I take a step in this direction, how does this feel? So I was literally like jotting down like, well, my editors just sent me back edits and I can't bring myself to open them because I just know it's going to be a sea of red, and it's just the constant human failure to communicate, even with the people that closest to this feels terrible, and I'm just maybe I should drink strychnine, or I'll go take a walk instead. And I'm out here taking a walk and life is beautiful. Like this is so great. And so as I was doing that's the sort of thing I guess I would recommend. Just try different things. Try writing the real in-depth narrative stem winder. Try focusing more on the fast-paced daily breaking news stuff. Maybe it's your editor that's the problem. Maybe it's not you. Maybe it is you. Maybe you need to adjust your attitude. Maybe you need to listen to criticism more. Maybe you need a different outlet. But I think, just taking some steps in different directions and seeing how it feels was really good advice for me.
That sounds pretty great. I was flashing this slide earlier. Jay Rosen, a long time ago, 1999, wrote the book "What Are Journalists For?" and Columbia Journalism Review did this really good survey. They asked a lot of journalists. They asked me, "What is journalism for?" And I liked Sebastian Younger had this good comment. A journalist is someone who is willing to disappoint himself with the truth.
That's amazing.
I kind of put that in the foreground a lot. Although it still doesn't answer that's like, what is the journalist for? But what is journalism for is a bigger question. And I still, as you know, I'm in this hybrid space now. I'm not sure if I call it journalism. Essentially what I'm doing with these webcasts often is an open form of reporting. I'm doing another one on Madagascar and climate change and climate risk. And I'm just trying to understand better Madagascar's plight and get away from the narratives that I come with and find the narratives that come from there and from people who have different perspectives on there. And does it change the world? I don't know. I've found a way to keep employed, but I'm not at the journalism school.
Yeah.
I'm at the climate school, and I'm writing this thing now, this bulletin thing it's funded by Facebook, which makes me feel, queasy in many ways. But I think it's an interesting experiment. I'm going to give them some time to see if it can cut through the smog. And I still, so overall, I'm still stuck in that model. I haven't stopped. I could go back into being a musician, but there's no money there.
Right.
So I don't know. So for those who are still in the game and now as a consumer of journalism, do you have this final sense yet of what journalism is for, especially on these issues that we focus on so hard?
Well, I think, there's a fundamental, it's a lot of different things, right? But I think the most important thing for me that journalism is for is providing a ground truth, just ground truthing. Just, we've gotten to this place where the connection to the truth is very loose, right? Where we have a lot of people that simply believe things that aren't true, with all of their heart and their minds, and their identities are wrapped up in these falsehoods. And so it's important just to have dispatches from the real world. It's an especially weird time to be doing that because of that political situation. But so that's at this point, it's kind of refreshing to be able to step back and not feel like I need to drink from the fire hose every day. But I still want those. I still want to know what's going on beyond my immediate touchable sphere.
Do you also feel like you've left the field in good shape? Meaning, I don't mean you in good shape, but the field. There's a lot more of this out there than there was when I started on this arena 35 years ago, and there's a lot more than when you started. And there's some really high quality, beautiful stuff happening. I love what Amy Westerfeld has been doing with her family of podcasts, not just one, drilled.
Absolutely.
Just interrogating things ferociously. And that's just one tiny example. So do you feel like part of the comfort level in moving out is that things are ultimately going to work out?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I can look around and I can see lots of good examples, and I can certainly, I was sort of focused on Grist, and I felt good about the cadre of journalists there, just really strong, and I think what Norm Benson was saying does, like, I've heard Stuart Brand say similar things. That gives me some hope. This long view that we've been through many crises, and it's a natural human instinct to pay attention to the oncoming boulder, or the roar and the underbrush. of course, that's what keeps us alive. But when you take the long view, there is some hope there, in that we've managed to survive the the boulders in the past. I just wanted to show you. I brought this little.
Hold on. Let me switch the screen.
This is a little show and tell from today. This is a bit of fish tape, that we use to push through conduit and then pull the wire through. And this one, as my boss was pushing it through, it came too close to the energized part of the panel. And this part, you can see it's cleaved clean off, and the other, these holes are from the electricity arcing. So there was a little excitement to wake me up with my hobby. And he's holding it with bare hands. This is stainless steel.
Yikes!
But because it's arcing from it follows the path of the least resistance, so it goes into the box and into the grounding rod, and everything is fortunately done right, rather than going through the skin, which has a lot more resistance, and is Adidas, which insulates from the ground. So pretty dramatic.
So there's still hazards you're dealing with, for sure. Electricity is something you have to be careful with.
Yeah.
Well, it's been great to talk with you for this hour. Nathanael Johnson of Grist, and now of
Kasdan Electric.
Is there a name for the company? Yeah,
Kasdan Electric.
Kasdan Electric. And good luck going forward, and report back periodically if you can.
All right.
Is that
It's
a
great to
cello
chat with
behind you? Do I see a cello? Or is that...
Yeah, that's my older daughter's cello.
Oh, cool. I'm glad to see there's music in the house too. This is Andy Revkin, Columbia Climate School Sustain What episode on the future after journalism and the future of journalism. Speaking with Nathanael Johnson, Nate Johnson, Sabertooth. Follow him on Twitter still, and you learn a lot about current and circuits and breaker boxes and it's on the path to electrifying everything. Take care of yourself.
All right, you too.
Take care.